Congratulations to Greg and Joe Streeter and their crew from Streeter Brothers Concrete Contractors of Burton for winning the Michigan Concrete Association Award for Special Innovative Projects for their work on the Esther Williams Pool at the Grand Hotel on Mackinac Island. Great work, guys. The Grand Hotel on Michigan's famous Mackinac Island. It's been known as America's summer place since it opened in 1887. The famous Esther Williams swimming pool, as it's been called since 1947, is located directly in front and slightly below the iconic front porch of the hotel. When the pool was originally installed, over 100 years ago in 1920, it was known as the Paul Bunyan Pool, so named because there was an identical slipper-shaped pool in Traverse City. And legend has it, the famous giant lumberjack traveling north first stepped on Traverse City and then on Mackinac Island, leaving his gigantic footprints, which of course were made into pools for all to enjoy. What would it be like if you were the concrete contractor providing the foundation modernizing an American treasure like this? How do you pour and form between 11 and 1,200 cubic yards of concrete on an island composed almost entirely of boulders, ranging in size from around 8 inches up to 2 feet, in the middle of the Straits of Mackinac, in the dead of an Arctic-like winter, with your only access being by ferry boat? Streeter Brothers Inc. of Burton, Michigan did just that. They had only 7 brutal winter months to complete the Herculean task before reopening in time for Memorial Day 2021. Over the next 15 minutes or so, we'll see how Greg and Joe Streeter and their crew accomplished this in grand fashion while working in daunting weather conditions and solid frozen ground as temperatures plummet and winds pummel. On Labor Day 2020, the 100-year-old pool closed and was drained for the last time, and Streeter Brothers began the demolition of the pool and structures around it to begin the grand improvements which will ultimately lead to a grand reopening of the pool and brand new pool house in time for Memorial Day 2021. As they approached the last week of September, this is the way it looked. Obviously, there's much to be done on this deep dive rehabilitation of a Grand Ladies 100-year-old slipper. The Streeter Brothers crew was able to begin work on the pool building additions the last week of September. But when they were first contracted to pour the concrete for the massive rebuilding of the Grand Hotel pool and pool house, they were informed that they would not be allowed to use the ready-mix trucks and concrete pump truck until after they closed for the season November 1st. But the first week in October, the Mackinac Island City Council came through and gave approval for 1 ready-mix truck and a concrete pump truck to be brought over to the job site. Taking advantage of this, Greg and Joe Streeter and their crew were able to accelerate the pouring of more concrete while the weather is still more or less cooperative. This allowed the guys to make a trip home for Halloween and to vote in the election before returning to the now all but deserted island. When Greg and Joe and their crew returned November 4th, they began forming the last section of building foundations, a task made much harder due to the very steep slope they were forced to work on. Still, the work was finished by the 9th, a full 6 weeks ahead of schedule. Blustery conditions the 6th through the 8th made this and the placing of the resteel in the new pool floor area challenging. The new pool floor was poured in 3 different sections, utilizing about 85 cubic yards of concrete. The weather in November was uncharacteristically cooperative, allowing the Streeter crew to pour the largest section of the pool floor on November 20th. 75 bags of concrete totaling over 56 cubic yards were poured, and the first pour for the new pool wall was completed the next day. Looking at the site, it's hard to imagine how this can all be done by Memorial Day, especially considering northern Michigan's well-deserved reputation for long stretches of really nasty winter weather. But fortunately, Streeter Brothers' patent-pending Go Fast technology conquers all, as you can see here. Now that's Streeter Fast. Late November, Greg and Joe and the crew started forming the first section of the main pool wall. After 3 different pours, they finished pouring the last 2 sections of wall on December 15th. By the way, all the walls were radius walls formed with straight Simon's forms. The holiday season bearing down on Mackinac Island usually means snow, and the Streeter Brothers crew were looking forward to a white Christmas as much as the rest of us. But before they could head home for the holidays, they had to work through the first snowstorm on the island. That came on December 12th, dropping 6 inches on the project site. Not a big storm by northern Michigan standards, but it still creates logistical challenges when your job is pouring, forming, finishing, and curing huge amounts of concrete that'll have to hold thousands of gallons of water for many years to come. Of course, the Streeter Brothers crew is up to the task with the assistance of ground thawing and concrete curing heating technology. Hundreds of feet of hose pumping hundreds of gallons of heated glycol solution does the trick, and the largest wall pour of the project takes place on schedule during the small storm. Then finally on December 15th, the Streeter crew finished forming the last 2 sections of the exterior pool walls. The next day, they were able to pour a few smaller sections and poured the basement slab that'll house the pool mechanical equipment. Meanwhile, the family whirlpool floor took several days to prep and place the re-steel, and the concrete floor was finally poured on December 17th. This was the last pour of 2020 on the pool. Streeter Brothers will return to the island 2 days after Christmas to pour concrete inside the Grand Hotel laundry room, and that'll take 3 days to prep and pour. So the gang cleaned up the pool area, organized and covered their materials just in case they got another snowstorm, and everybody left on Friday, December 18th, feeling pretty good. They were ahead of schedule. After their Christmas break, the crew returned to Mackinac Island on December 28th, bringing with them different equipment to pour the pier foundations and new floors inside the hotel laundry room renovation project, enlarging the first 4 of 6 interior piers, with the re-steel installed on the 28th and then poured on December 30th. Then the crew caught the last ferry leaving the island for a very rough boat ride so they could be with their families for New Year's. When the project began, 2 ground thaw machines were delivered to the island, but the project engineers were concerned about concrete bags that were being left out in the weather and brought another ground thaw machine to keep the ready-mix bags warm and dry for the remainder of the winter, clearing the way for 400 more bags to be delivered the first week of January. On January 6th, the Streeter Brothers Inc. crew started to tie, re-steel, and form about 150 feet of the 18-inch wide, 30-inch high bench seats inside the pool. And on January 7th, they tied, re-steel, and formed the first of 3 sets of steps being built into the pool. The extreme cold of a northern Michigan winter necessitates a temporary shelter be built over the adult pool and the ground thaw equipment to run 24/7. This meant the crew found themselves needing more diesel fuel to be delivered to the island. Webster & Garner Oil and Propane of Clio and Houghton Lake came through, and on January 15th, a Webster & Garner delivery driver loaded his truck with over 2,000 gallons of off-road diesel fuel and made the trip across the straits on another very windy day. In less than an hour, he filled their fuel storage tanks at the docks and headed back home. Next, Greg and Joe Streeter turned their attention to the adult pool waterfall foundation. Foundations were formed and re-steel installed January 18th, and the footing was poured the next day. And on Friday, January 22nd, 28 cubic yards of concrete were poured in the bar and kitchen area. That makes 4 days of pouring concrete on Mackinac Island in the middle of January. At the same time, a temporary shelter was erected over the entire family pool, allowing the pool contractor to start working on the pool finishes during the coldest part of the season. And on January 30th, the massive washing machine concrete pads were prepped and the re-steel placed and ready for an inspection. During the last week of January, each day got windier and progressively colder, with low temperatures between 15 and 9 degrees and winds at 15 to 25 miles an hour. And the last couple days of January, even heavier weather came to Mackinac Island, making it impossible for the Sheboygan cement truck drivers to get there. So, Streeter Brothers moved inside to finish the laundry room floor, and the crew wasted no time, placing 45 yards of concrete by noon and finishing just after midnight. A long but productive day for the crew. It's been a very busy couple of weeks for the gang from Streator. And the week of February 15th brought even more frigid weather with 0-degree temperatures. But these guys are on deadline, and there was much to do. On February 16th, they started prep work on the floor of the adult pool and spa. The next day, they tied the re-steel there, and on February 18th, poured the 8-inch thick concrete floor. In the middle of those 3 days, on the 17th, Greg and Joe Streator's crew had to solve a big problem. They needed an additional 8,000 pounds of rebar, and the boats weren't running due to the fact that the straits were now frozen over. So 8 trips of a 14-seat passenger plane filled with over 1,000 pounds of rebar, cut in half to fit, and mission accomplished. Of course, when you're on an island in the middle of the Straits of Mackinac, nothing is that easy. Each load had to be cut, weighed precisely for FAA regulations, loaded, flown to the island, unloaded to a dray, and then delivered to the job site and unloaded. All in a frigid day's work for these guys. On Saturday, February 20th, they started forming the pool edge and concrete cap to be poured later in the week. And after a much-needed day off on Sunday, Monday morning, they were right back at it, pouring the first section of pool coping. And Greg was very happy with the way it turned out. The next day, Greg and Joe's crew formed the adult pool walls for a pour later in the week. Then on Friday, they poured those walls. This took several hours to complete, as there were dozens of radiuses and a whirlpool spa built entirely inside the pool. On the weekend, the crew formed more terrace foundations and terrace walls for a midweek inspection and pour. Then, on March 16th and 18th, they made 2 more pours on those terrace walls and foundations that were formed on March 8th. And some pretty good news. The weather is finally starting to warm up in the afternoon most days. But as April 1st arrived, there was no fooling around, as the crew had to pour over 60 bags of concrete for the spread footings of the terrace walls. And with that, the final countdown began. 30 days until the Streator Brothers heavy equipment must be off Mackinac Island. Obviously, the team has to keep cranking. Streator Brothers must finish the concrete around the Esther Williams Pool by the end of April. So, on April 13th, after all the inspections were completed, the crew poured the last 200 feet of terrace walls using over 50 bags of concrete. The rest of the week was spent forming stairway wall and step foundations, and on Thursday, extra cement finishers were brought to the island to start pouring over 10,000 square feet of colored sidewalks and over 60 colored concrete steps going down to the pool. The next day, Streator Brothers started pouring the first section of pool deck sidewalks, finishing the second section on Saturday. Around this time, they had to begin loading out equipment to take back to St. Ignace and then haul back to Burton. Here's what the site looked like with approximately 5 weeks till Memorial Day. Less than a week to go before the heavy equipment had to be off the island, and there was still a lot of concrete to be poured and finished. We're getting close. On the weekend of April 29th, both ready-mix trucks and the concrete pump truck, along with other equipment, were escorted off the job site by the Mackinac Island Police to the other side of the island at British Landing so that it could be ferried off the island. With 2 bags of concrete still left to pour and no big equipment to mix it, they had to use the 1-yard mixer they started the job with back in October. And after 7 months of pouring 1,425 cubic yards of concrete, over 5.7 million pounds, and with 52 tons of re-steel, and using the pump truck 52 times, Streator Brothers Inc. of Burton, Michigan, finished their work 6 hours ahead of their final deadline, set 1 year before. It had been a long 7.5 months since the Streator Brothers crew from Burton, Michigan took on the gargantuan task that no one else dared to try. Being the concrete contractor to rebuild a 100-year-old American treasure, the iconic Esther Williams Pool at the Grand Hotel on Mackinac Island, is a professional risk, but one the Streator Brothers crew took on as a challenge. And now you can judge how well they met that challenge. On July 27th, Greg Streator and his wife Kathy returned to the island to show us how it all turned out. Remember how the site looked in October of last year? And in the dead of a northern Michigan winter? Take a look at us now. These were the steps the crew had to pour twice when the bottom form gave way under the weight of the concrete the first time. Here's a look at the terrace area before and after. How do you like the new water slide? The new kids' pool. The adult pool. All those colored sidewalks. The wood deck and southern wall. And the new water slide and water jet splash pad play area. Oops, 4 bags of concrete left over. Somebody over-ordered. As we close, Streeter Brothers Inc. of Burton, Michigan would like to thank their suppliers. On February 17, 2022, Streeter Brothers Concrete Contractors of Burton were issued an award from the Michigan Concrete Association in the Special Innovative Project category for their incredible work on the iconic Esther Williams Pool at the Grand Hotel on Mackinac Island in 2021. Once again, guys, great work.